Providence, Rhode Island, February 28, 2019. A courtroom packed with cameras, 2.4 million people watching live. Judge Frank Caprio, America's kindest judge, viral sensation, the man who cried with defendants and paid their fines, sits across from a police officer sweating on the witness stand. Between them, a traffic citation clipboard. The officer's testimony is confident, practiced. Illegal parking. Disabled veteran refused to comply. Standard violation. But on Caprio's desk sits something else. Medical records showing a 73% VA disability rating, a Purple Heart, stage 3 cancer. The judge leans forward. 6 words leave his mouth. Did you thank him for serving? 11 seconds of silence. The officer doesn't answer. The courtroom freezes. The live stream explodes, and in those 90 seconds, a 12-year police career begins to unravel. What the officer didn't know, that clipboard was about to become evidence of something nobody had been tracking. Frank Caprio became a legend by breaking his own rules. Between 2015 and 2019, his Providence Municipal Court became the most watched courtroom in America. Not for drama, but for mercy. Over 5 million YouTube followers watched him dismiss speeding tickets for struggling mothers, tear up parking fines for minimum wage workers, and personally pay court fees for defendants who couldn't afford them. The show, Court in Providence, streamed to viewers in 78 countries. Grandmothers sent him letters. College students quoted him in ethics papers. He was the judge who made you believe the system had a heart. But people who watched every episode noticed something else. Certain cases never got dismissed. DUIs, reckless endangerment, and anything involving disrespect to veterans. Caprio's father was an Italian immigrant who served in World War II and earned a Purple Heart at Anzio. That medal sat in a frame behind the judge's bench, visible in every shot. Frank Caprio had a line you didn't cross. You just had to know where it was. The officer had a system. 12 years on the Providence police force, most of it assigned to traffic enforcement in the downtown medical district. His productivity numbers were legendary. 340 citations written in 2019 alone, a station record. Colleagues called him by the book, which was both respect and warning. He didn't do warnings, didn't do second chances. The citation clipboard was his signature tool, always visible on his dashboard, filled with neat block letters. Every violation documented to departmental standard. Every fine calculated to maximum allowable. He'd received 3 commendations for enforcement excellence. Command loved officers who delivered measurable results. The medical district was premium territory. Constant turnover, time-limited meters, stressed drivers making mistakes. Easy tickets, high volume. The officer understood his role. Enforced the law equally. No exceptions. If someone parked illegally, they got cited. Didn't matter if they were late. For an appointment, didn't matter if they had a good reason. The law was the law. That philosophy had built his entire career. It would also destroy it. The veteran was 61 years old. 20 years in the Marine Corps, 1978 to 1998, with a Gulf War deployment that earned him a Purple Heart and a 73% VA disability rating. By February 2019, he was fighting stage 3 cancer with weekly chemotherapy sessions at the Providence VA Medical Center. Each treatment left him weak, nauseous, barely able to walk. On the morning of February 14th, he parked outside the VA hospital for his appointment. He was 15 minutes over the meter limit. The officer's citation was waiting on his windshield when he came out, leaning on his son's arm. $85 fine, doubled to $170 for medical district violation. The veteran stared at the ticket, then at his Purple Heart license plate. He was too exhausted to contest it that day. The court date was set for 6 weeks out, February 28th. The choice was brutal. Pay $170 or risk losing VA prescription coverage over an unpaid citation. He filed the paperwork to appear. He'd served his country. He'd defend himself one more time. The night before the hearing, Caprio reviewed the case file in his chambers. Standard procedure. Officer testimony, defendant plea, judgment. But something stopped him. The citation noted a Purple Heart license plate. The officer's handwritten notes said the defendant refused to move vehicle when requested. Attached to the file was the veteran's letter, chemotherapy appointment log, oncologist's note, service record showing the Purple Heart and disability rating. Caprio read it twice. The officer had written the Purple Heart plate number directly into the citation but never mentioned the veteran's status in his report. The judge circled that detail with a red pen. Either the officer didn't notice, which seemed impossible given the documentation, or he noticed and didn't care. Caprio thought about his father's Purple Heart, the one in the frame behind his bench. He thought about Anzio, about the price of service. Then he thought about what it meant to write a ticket to a cancer patient standing in front of a VA hospital with a Purple Heart on his car and not even acknowledge it. The question forming in his mind was simple. Did the officer know? February 28th, 2019, Thursday morning slot, 9:15 a.m. The courtroom was full. Caprio's show always drew a crowd, but Thursdays pulled heavy traffic because of the live stream. 2.4 million viewers logged in, a typical number for peak viewing. The officer arrived in full uniform, confident, carrying the citation clipboard. He'd testified in this courtroom dozens of times. Standard process: state the facts, answer questions, move on. Across the gallery, the veteran arrived with his son, visibly ill, using an oxygen tank. The cancer had progressed since February 14th. He could barely stand. Caprio called the case. The cameras focused. The officer took the stand, raised his right hand, swore the oath. He opened with his prepared testimony. Defendant was parked illegally in the medical district, remained in violation despite posted signage, received a lawful citation. His tone was professional, matter-of-fact. He'd delivered this testimony hundreds of times. But Caprio interrupted before he could finish. Officer, did you see the Purple Heart license plate on the defendant's vehicle? The officer paused. I observed the vehicle. Yes, Your Honor. Careful answer. Exact answer. And that's when the hunt began. Caprio leaned forward. The viewers noticed the shift. His voice dropped. His expression hardened. You observed the vehicle. Did you observe the Purple Heart plate specifically? The officer maintained composure. I observed all aspects of the violation, Your Honor. My focus was on the parking infraction. Textbook response. Stick to procedure. Don't deviate. But Caprio wasn't letting go. The citation lists the Purple Heart plate number. You wrote it down. You documented it, so you saw it. The officer nodded. Yes, Your Honor, I documented the vehicle identification as required. The veteran's son stood up from the gallery. Your Honor, my father was inside the VA hospital receiving chemotherapy when that ticket was written. He's a Purple Heart recipient. He has stage 3 cancer. Caprio raised a hand. Quiet, not now. But his eyes never left the officer. The officer doubled down. Your Honor, parking regulations apply equally to all citizens regardless of status. I enforce the law as written. That answer. That exact phrasing. The courtroom temperature dropped 10 degrees. Caprio's face changed. Viewers who'd watched him for years recognized the look. Someone had crossed the line. Caprio set down his pen. He folded his hands. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost quiet, but the microphones caught every word. Officer, I'm going to ask you a simple question. When you saw that Purple Heart license plate, when you wrote down that number when you saw this man's car parked outside a VA hospital, did you thank him for his service? Silence. 11 seconds of it. Viewers later timed it frame by frame. The officer's mouth opened slightly. No words came. His training had prepared him for legal questions, procedural challenges, defendant accusations. Nobody had prepared him for this. The question wasn't about the law, it was about respect, about recognition, about seeing a Purple Heart and understanding what it cost. Caprio didn't wait for an answer. He knew silence was the answer. The question had become the evidence. Everything the officer didn't say in that moment revealed everything about how he'd approached the citation. The courtroom stayed frozen. The live stream chat exploded, 400,000 comments in 2 minutes. Someone had just ended a career with 6 words. The officer still hadn't spoken. Caprio made his decision immediately. Case dismissed. 0 fine, no court costs. He turned to the veteran, who was crying now, his son's arm around his shoulders. Sir, thank you for your service. I apologize that you had to come here today. Then he turned back to the officer. His voice was steel. This is unacceptable. You saw a Purple Heart. You saw a VA hospital. You wrote that ticket anyway and never once acknowledged this man's sacrifice. You're dismissed from my courtroom. The officer tried to respond. Your Honor, I was simply enforcing... But Caprio cut him off with a raised hand. The gavel came down. The citation clipboard sat abandoned on the witness stand, its pages filled with neat documentation that suddenly looked like evidence of something darker. Within 2 hours, the video had 400,000 shares across social media. By 3 p.m., local news stations were running the clip. By evening, the officer's name had leaked, not from the court, but from online sleuths who cross-referenced the department roster with a case number. The Providence Police Department's phone lines were burning. Discovery. Silence can be an answer. And sometimes it's the worst one. The Providence Police Department received 12,000 complaint emails and calls in 48 hours. The volume crashed their public affairs server twice. Internal Affairs opened a formal review on March 2, 2019, 4 days after the courtroom confrontation. They pulled the officer's complete citation history, 340 tickets written in 2019, 298 in 2018, 276 in 2017. Productivity champion 3 years running. But when they filtered by location and vehicle registration, a pattern emerged that nobody had been tracking. 67 citations issued to vehicles with veteran plates between January 2018 and February 2019. All of them in the medical district, all of them displaying Purple Heart or disabled veteran designations. Not one warning issued. Every citation written for maximum allowable fine. The department's initial assumption that the February 28th case was an isolated incident collapsed in an afternoon of data analysis. This wasn't one bad ticket. This was systematic. The officer's productivity had a specific source. He'd been targeting the most vulnerable population in his jurisdiction, the ones least likely to fight back, the ones who couldn't afford to miss medical appointments to contest an $85 fine. The one case that went viral had exposed a pattern nobody was watching for. The officer was placed on administrative leave March 2nd, pending investigation. Media outlets began tracking down the 67 veterans, 41 responded. The stories were identical, parked at the VA for medical appointments, cited despite emergency circumstances, given maximum fines with no warnings. One veteran, a 72-year-old Vietnam vet, had missed a scheduled surgery because he'd driven downtown to contest a ticket in person, afraid an unpaid citation would affect his benefits. Another lost temporary VA housing assistance after an unpaid parking. Fine triggered an administrative flag. The officer's defense, delivered through his union attorney, was consistent. My client enforced traffic laws equally and without prejudice. He applied the same standard to all citizens. But Internal Affairs pulled his body camera footage from 17 incidents. Frame by frame, the videos showed him approaching vehicles, reading Purple Heart plates, writing citations, walking away. He'd seen the plates every time. Known what they meant every time. Written the tickets anyway. The discovery was damning. Targeting wasn't about malice, it was about efficiency. Veterans parked near the VA on a predictable schedule. Easy to find, unlikely to fight. Perfect for quota building. The chain was clear. Targeting led to productivity. Productivity led to commendations. Commendations led to promotions. Judge Caprio released a video statement on March 5, 2019. 8.1 million views in 24 hours, his largest audience ever. He sat at his desk, his father's Purple Heart visible in the frame behind him, and spoke for 6 minutes. 6 words revealed everything. His silence was his confession. He explained his father's World War II service, what the Purple Heart meant, what it cost. We don't ticket the people who bled for the parking spaces we use freely. He called for immediate policy change. Veterans with disability plates should receive automatic 2-hour grace periods at VA facilities citywide. No citations. No exceptions. The veteran appeared beside him in the video's final minute, shaken but grateful. Caprio ended the statement, holding up the citation clipboard. The actual one from the courtroom, retrieved from evidence. This cost the city nothing to print. His service cost him everything. The moment became legend. Shares multiplied. News outlets across the country picked up the story. Veteran advocacy groups used the clip in congressional testimony about VA access. The clipboard, an ordinary administrative tool, had transformed into a symbol. Sometimes the smallest objects carry the largest lessons. This one would end up in a museum. Internal Affairs completed its investigation on March 18, 2019. The findings were clear. Systematic targeting of disabled veterans, driven by quota pressure and productivity metrics, with no evidence of personal malice but overwhelming evidence of ethical violation and conduct unbecoming an officer. The department gave him a choice: resign immediately or face a public termination hearing. He resigned March 20, 2019, ending a 12-year career. No pension forfeiture. He'd served long enough to keep basic benefits, but no recommendation letter, no transfer option, no path back to law enforcement anywhere. The 67 veterans received full refunds, $11,780 total, paid from the department's administrative budget. Providence's City Council passed the Veterans Hospital Parking Grace Act on April 2, 2019, any vehicle displaying valid military disability. Plates received automatic 2-hour parking immunity within 3 blocks of the VA Medical Center. Violations could only be issued after patient verification. The policy change was named in honor of the veteran who'd stood up in Caprio's courtroom. The cost was tallied. 1 clipboard, 1 question, 6 words, 12 years erased, 67 veterans vindicated, 1 city's laws rewritten. The officer never gave a media interview. Some silences last forever. 6 months later, the officer was working private security at a Providence shopping mall, making $15 an hour. No uniform, no authority, no clipboard. Just a radio and a flashlight and instructions to call real police if anything serious happened. He never spoke publicly about what happened. Never gave his side of the story. The union moved on to other cases. Meanwhile, the veteran's cancer went into remission. He returned to Caprio's courtroom in September 2019, not as a defendant, but as a guest. The video of that reunion went viral again. 14 million total views across all platforms. Caprio's show expanded to 90 countries, subscribers climbing past 6 million. Providence became nationally known for veteran-friendly policies, a reputation the city marketed heavily. Other municipalities adopted similar VA parking grace rules, citing Providence as the model. The 6 words, "Did you thank him for serving?" became a training scenario in police academies across the country. used to teach situational awareness and respect. The transformation was complete, from enforcer to example, from productivity champion to cautionary tale. Sometimes one question changes more than a career. Sometimes it changes how an entire system sees itself. The traffic citation clipboard was donated to the Providence Veterans Museum in January 2020. It sits in a display case near the entrance, surrounded by the case file, Caprio's video statement transcript, and the veteran's handwritten letter. The plaque reads, "The cost of 6 words." The officer's name isn't included. At the veteran's request, the focus remained on the lesson, not the person. Judge Caprio visits the exhibit annually, bringing his father's Purple Heart to place beside the clipboard for the ceremony. The veteran attends when his health allows, standing proof that sometimes the system corrects itself, even if it takes a viral video and 6 perfect words to make it happen. The clipboard itself looks ordinary. Black plastic, metal clip, standard department issue. But ordinary objects become legendary when they're present at the right moment. This one documented violations. Then it became evidence. Then it became memory. The final lesson stays simple, carved into that museum plaque. What you enforce reveals what you value. And the question, the one that started everything, echoes. Did you thank him for serving?